Identity First Habits: Becoming the Person Who Succeeds. Written by Ronnie Rowland. Published by Growth Literacy Lounge. The greatest lies are the ones we live like they're true. You've heard them: just set bigger goals. Work harder. Change your habits, change your life. But if that worked, you'd already be where you want to be. The truth? You don't rise to the level of your goals. You fall to the level of your identity. Most people chase change like rearranging furniture in a burning house. They tweak schedules, adopt new routines, buy productivity tools, but underneath it all, they're still the same person, thinking the same way, telling the same story. That's why nothing sticks. That's why motivation fades. That's why it always feels like 2 steps forward, 3 steps back. This book isn't about doing more. It's about becoming more. Because until you change the internal story, the external results won't last. As James Clear said, every action you take is a vote for the type of person you wish to become. This book is about learning to cast those votes with purpose. You don't need another hack. You need a new foundation, built not on hustle, but on alignment. This book will teach you how to build habits that don't just stick, they belong to you. Habits that reflect who you are becoming, not who you're trying to impress. This is not behavior modification. It's identity transformation. If you're ready to stop chasing change and start becoming the kind of person for whom success is inevitable, read on. The version of you you're becoming is already waiting. Let's go meet them. Chapter 1: The Identity Gap. A man trains for a marathon. He wakes up early, laces his shoes, runs in the rain, counts his macros, and tracks every mile. He finishes the race, earns his medal, posts the photo. Then he stops running. Months pass, and he's back on the couch. What happened? He acted like a runner, but he never became one. This is the identity gap, the space between what you do and who you are. Most people live in that gap. They chase goals, implement tactics, and will power their way through new habits. But eventually they slide back to old patterns. Not because they're lazy or weak, but because they never change the core driver: identity. Behavior that isn't anchored in identity is always temporary. You've seen it in others, and probably in yourself. The person who sets a goal to lose 20 pounds. They join the gym, buy the blender, download the meal plan. For a while, they're unstoppable. But the moment stress hits, the habits crumble. Not because they didn't try hard enough, but because deep down, they still saw themselves as someone who struggles with health. Identity sets the ceiling. You cannot consistently act in a way that contradicts your self-image. That's why most self-help advice eventually fails. It starts with action: change your schedule, install this habit, follow this morning routine. But it skips the foundation. It's like trying to build a skyscraper on sand. Impressive at first, but destined to collapse under pressure. Real, lasting change doesn't begin with doing something different. It begins with becoming someone different. This shift is subtle but powerful. Instead of asking, "What should I do to succeed?" ask, "Who is the kind of person who naturally succeeds at this, and how do I become them?" This is where identity-first habits come in. You don't need to overhaul your life overnight. You don't need more motivation. You don't need another podcast or productivity hack. You need a new internal story. Because your brain is always listening to how you act. Every time you take a step, it casts a vote toward the kind of person you believe yourself to be. One healthy meal isn't just nutrition, it's identity reinforcement. One act of focus isn't just discipline, it's evidence. You're teaching your brain, "This is who I am now." The mistake most people make is treating habits like tasks on a checklist. They're not. Habits are votes. Repetitions that sculpt the self. Want to become a reader? Don't aim for a book a week. Read 1 page today. Want to become organized? Clean 1 drawer. Want to become calm under pressure? Breathe through 1 tough moment. Identity builds like compound interest, small deposits, made consistently. The goal isn't perfection. The goal is alignment. The more your daily actions reflect your desired identity, the less effort success requires. You don't have to push. You're pulled by who you already are. The man who is a runner doesn't have to force his run. It's part of him. The person who is financially wise doesn't have to resist every impulse buy. Spending decisions are filtered through who they believe they are. The identity gap closes not by trying harder, but by becoming clearer. So pause and ask yourself, who are you becoming? Are your daily votes reinforcing the person you want to be, or the one you're trying to leave behind? This book will help you bridge that gap, starting now. In the next chapter, you'll meet a metaphor that will change the way you view success forever, and reveal why most people are building their lives upside down. You can't outperform your identity. Habits are votes for who you believe you are. Lasting change starts with becoming, not doing. Where in your life are you acting differently than who you believe you are? Name one identity you want to embody. Take one small action today that casts a vote for it. Chapter 2: Furniture without foundation. Imagine trying to furnish a home that doesn't exist. You pick out a leather couch, a sleek dining set, some modern art. It all looks beautiful in the showroom. But when you take it to the lot where your house is supposed to be, there's nothing but dirt. No foundation. No walls. Just open space. The furniture has nowhere to go. That's how most people chase success. They start with the furniture, the tactics, the tools, the shortcuts. They ask, what's the best productivity app? Or which diet burns fat fastest? They obsess over what other successful people are doing and try to copy their routines. But they're placing furniture on an empty lot. There's no internal structure to hold it. Without a foundation, nothing lasts. This is why New Year's resolutions collapse by February. It's not that people aren't serious. It's that they're stacking behavioral furniture on an identity that hasn't been built to support it. You can follow a millionaire's schedule, but if you still see yourself as financially disorganized, it won't stick. You can copy a top athlete's meal prep, but if you believe you're lazy or inconsistent, you'll break the pattern. Identity is the cement slab underneath everything else. It determines what can stand and what collapses. Yet this truth is rarely taught. Most people are sold systems, not selfhood. They're promised results without being invited to become someone new. It's easier to sell a meal plan than to help someone reconstruct their internal narrative. It's faster to market morning routines than to walk someone through reshaping their self-image. But the hard way is the only way that works. The difference between someone who tries to wake up at 5 a.m. and someone who just does it? Identity. One is testing out a tactic. The other is living in alignment with who they believe they are. For the second person, early rising isn't a struggle, it's a reflection. Every behavior you attempt has to pass through your identity filter. If the action is inconsistent with who you believe you are, your subconscious will resist it. Not out of malice, but out of loyalty to the story it's been repeating for years. I'm not a morning person. I'm terrible with money. I just don't follow through. These aren't just excuses. They're foundational scripts, and until they're rewritten, nothing on top will hold. Think of it this way: habits are surface level. Identity is structural. If you don't rebuild the structure, the surface will always crack under pressure. This is why so many people can mimic success for a while and then revert. The environment changed, the tactic expired, the novelty wore off. And suddenly, their actions no longer had a reason to exist. They didn't belong to someone, they were just borrowed. When success feels like an act, it can never be sustainable. But when it feels like a reflection of who you are, it becomes natural. So stop buying furniture before you've poured concrete. Before the schedule, before the to-do list, before the plan, ask yourself, what kind of person am I building this life on? Is my foundation stable enough to hold the life I'm trying to create? If not, don't panic. Just rebuild. Pour something new. Start from the ground up. In the next chapter, you'll discover how small, ordinary actions, done consistently, can begin to shape the very foundation of your identity. These are the microvotes that stack into selfhood. And they begin right now. Most people chase tactics instead of building identity. Without a foundation, behavior won't stick. Identity must be built before habits can be sustained. Where in your life are you trying to copy success without building a foundation for it? Write down one belief about yourself that's no longer serving you. Replace it with a new identity declaration. Chapter 3. You become what you repeatedly do. A single drop of water falls on a stone. Then another. Then another. One drop does nothing. But after days, weeks, years, grooves form. The stone changes shape, not because of intensity, but because of consistency. That's how identity works. You are carved, not in moments of greatness, but in the quiet repetition of your choices. People overestimate what one big action can do and underestimate what small repeated actions create. They chase transformation in a weekend, hoping a seminar or breakthrough will rewire everything. But identity doesn't form in fireworks. It forms in fingerprints, tiny, repeated impressions made over time. Every action you take is a vote for the person you're becoming. Think about that. Each time you choose water over soda, you cast a vote for, I'm a healthy person. Every time you sit down and write, even one sentence, you cast a vote for, I'm a writer. These votes aren't meaningless. They're shaping the way you see yourself. They're reinforcing a story, and that story becomes your operating system. This is the secret most people miss. They wait to feel different before acting different. But action precedes identity. You don't need to believe you're disciplined to act with discipline. You just need to cast the vote. Once. Then again. And again. Eventually, the story changes, not because you talked yourself into it, but because your behavior gave it evidence. The challenge is that early votes feel invisible. You meditate one day and don't feel calmer. You save $5 and your bank account looks the same. You exercise once and nothing changes in the mirror. So you assume it didn't matter. But identity change is like watching a tree grow. Nothing happens, then nothing happens, then everything happens. Slowly, then suddenly. Your habits are not just things you do. They are signals to your subconscious about who you are. When you skip a workout, your body doesn't just notice the inactivity, your mind registers it as a signal. This is like me. That's the most powerful sentence in behavior change. If your actions continually whisper, this is like me, they become your new normal. The problem is, the opposite is also true. Each time you hit snooze, skip the reading, break the promise, you're not just delaying progress. You're reinforcing a different identity. And the longer you vote for that version, the harder it is to run for a different office. But here's the good news, identity is fluid. It's not fixed in stone, it's formed like clay. Every single action is a chance to reshape it. You don't need 1,000 votes today. You just need one. One decision that nudges the narrative in a new direction. It's easy to think transformation is about big decisions. But identity grows through repetition. You don't become honest by telling one hard truth. You become honest by refusing to lie, again and again, until the world, and more importantly you, trust your word. You don't become confident by performing once. You become confident by showing up, even when afraid, over and over. This means your future identity isn't a mystery. It's just math. Add up the votes. Look at your choices. Who are you rehearsing to be? In the next chapter, we'll go deeper into how to flip the entire approach to change, how to stop obsessing over action plans and start focusing on character plans. Because once your question shifts from, what should I do? To, who do I want to become? Everything changes. Identity forms through repeated action. Every habit casts a vote for who you are becoming. Change begins with small, consistent choices, not feelings. What identity have your recent habits been voting for? Choose one action today that aligns with your desired identity. Cast the vote. Chapter 4: Flipping the Script. Most people live by a silent script. A loop that plays out in their decisions, goals, and habits. It starts with a question. What should I do? That question drives their planners, podcasts, and productivity tools. But it's the wrong question. It puts action before identity. It's like asking what color to paint a house you haven't built. The better question is, who do I want to become? This one shift rewrites the entire story. Instead of chasing results, you sculpt character. Instead of stacking new habits on an old identity, you build from the inside out. You stop treating success like a checklist and start treating it like a reflection. When you ask, "What should I do?" you're starting with behavior. You might find good answers: wake up early, eat clean, write daily. But even great actions can become hollow if they're disconnected from who you believe you are. That's why so many habits start strong and fade fast. They're not anchored. The question, "Who do I want to become?" flips the order. Now you're starting with being. You're asking a deeper question: what kind of person naturally does the things I want to do? Want to get fit? Don't just follow a workout plan. Ask, what would a healthy person do right now? Then do that. Want to be a better leader? Don't just read another leadership book. Ask, how would a confident, calm leader act in this moment? Then act accordingly. Over time, those micro decisions shift your identity, because they align behavior with a future self. This isn't just theory. It's how your brain works. The mind loves consistency. When your actions repeatedly reflect a certain type of person, your brain rewires itself to support that version of you. It begins filtering decisions, emotions, and even perceptions through that lens. You're no longer trying to be disciplined. You are disciplined. Because you've aligned your behavior with a deeper belief. But it takes intentionality. Because your current identity wasn't formed by accident, it was shaped by years of repeated thoughts, choices, and labels. Maybe someone once called you forgetful, and it stuck. Maybe you failed a few times and started believing you weren't cut out for consistency. These moments didn't just happen. They authored your internal script. Now you have the pen. And it's time to rewrite. That starts with clarity. You must define the person you want to become. Not just what they do, but how they think. What they believe. What standards they live by. This is your new script. Every action you take from that mindset reinforces it. Every decision becomes a rehearsal. And here's the secret: you don't have to feel like that person yet. You just have to act like them. Because action leads emotion. When you repeatedly act like the person you want to become, you begin to feel like them. Confidence follows behavior. Identity follows repetition. So the next time you're tempted to ask, "What should I do?" stop. Instead ask, "What would the future version of me do in this exact moment?" That's your new compass. That's how you make decisions in alignment with the person you're becoming. In the next chapter, we'll explore how to use small, identity-aligned actions to begin shaping that future self. You'll learn how to cast daily votes, not just for what you want, but for who you are. And when your habits reflect your chosen identity, change is no longer forced. It becomes inevitable. Stop asking, "What should I do?" and start asking, "Who do I want to become?" Behavior rooted in identity lasts longer than behavior rooted in tactics. Action reshapes identity through consistency. Who is the version of you you're trying to become, and are your daily choices aligned with them? Write down one identity you're stepping into. Act today as if it were already true. Chapter 5: Casting Votes for the Future You. Every action you take is a silent ballot cast in favor of who you are becoming. One workout is not a transformation. One clean meal doesn't rewrite your biology. One act of courage won't erase a lifetime of fear. But each is a vote. A small whisper that says, "This is who I am now." The power of identity-first habits lies in accumulation. No single act defines you. But patterns do. When repeated consistently, these votes shape the image in the mirror, not just physically, but psychologically. You begin to trust yourself. You no longer see change as something you chase. It becomes something you live. The problem is, most people wait for identity to arrive before they take action. They believe they need to feel like a writer before writing, feel like an athlete before training, feel like a leader before leading. But identity doesn't show up in advance. It shows up as a receipt. A byproduct of action taken. Consider someone who wants to be confident in public speaking. They attend one meeting and speak up. It's awkward. Their heart races. They stammer. but the vote is cast. Next time, it's slightly easier. Another vote. With every repetition, fear fades and familiarity grows. Eventually, they don't just act confident, they are confident. Because the votes accumulated into a new self-image. Casting votes is a simple process, but not an easy one. It requires consistency without perfection. One misvote doesn't cancel the others. What matters is the trend. It's not about being flawless, it's about being faithful. The goal isn't to never miss. The goal is to keep returning, keep voting, keep becoming. This is why small habits matter more than people think. They aren't just practical, they're symbolic. Reading one page may seem insignificant, but to the person who wants to be a lifelong learner, it's a declaration. Going to bed on time may not feel revolutionary, but to someone rebuilding discipline, it's a powerful affirmation. These actions are small in scale but large in meaning. Identity is built in the trenches of the ordinary. It's in the choices no one sees, the moments that don't make headlines, the quiet decisions that seem too minor to matter. But every time you act in alignment with the person you want to become, you reinforce the foundation. You say to yourself, "This is like me." And over time, that becomes the truth. The key is to focus on identity-based goals, not outcome-based ones. Don't just aim to run a marathon, aim to become the kind of person who trains, even when no one's watching. Don't just aim to save $10,000, become the kind of person who makes wise financial decisions daily. Outcomes are snapshots. Identity is the lifestyle behind the photo. The best part is this: your next vote is always within reach. You don't need a massive gesture. You just need a decision. A single act that aligns with who you want to be. The shift starts not with a grand vision, but with a small yes. In the next chapter, we'll explore how these identity-aligned actions become automatic through a concept called the habit loop. You'll see how to tie your future self to the rhythms of your daily life so that casting votes no longer requires constant effort, it becomes your default. Every action is a vote for the person you want to become. Identity follows action, not the other way around. Small habits matter more than they seem, they carry symbolic power. What small vote can you cast today that affirms the identity you're building? Pick one habit that aligns with your desired identity. Do it today, even if only for 1 minute. Chapter 6: The Habit Loop of Identity. Habits don't happen in isolation. They follow a pattern. A cue triggers a routine, which leads to a reward. Over time, this loop becomes automatic. You don't think about brushing your teeth, checking your phone, or locking your door. You just do it. It's not willpower, it's wiring. But here's the twist: this loop doesn't just shape your behavior. It shapes your identity. Each time the loop runs, it reinforces a belief about who you are. This is how action becomes self-image. Let's say your cue is waking up. Your routine is jogging. Your reward is a feeling of energy. Do this for a week, and it's a new task. Do it for a month, and it's a developing habit. Do it long enough, and it becomes part of your identity. You no longer say, "I'm trying to run." You say, "I'm a runner." The loop hasn't just changed your schedule, it's changed your story. This is the hidden engine behind identity-first habits. Every loop isn't just behavior, it's belief formation. And it works both ways. Negative loops build negative identities. A stress cue leads to junk food. The reward is relief. Repeat that often enough, and your brain begins to say, "I'm someone who eats to cope." You didn't set out to believe that. But the loop wrote it for you. To change the belief, you must interrupt the loop. Not by eliminating it overnight, but by rewriting it with intention. Choose a new response to the same cue. When stress hits, breathe instead of binge. Journal instead of scroll. Call someone instead of shutting down. At first, it feels forced. But with repetition, the new loop begins to write a new story. The key is not just to start new loops, but to make them easy to repeat. Environment matters. If your guitar is in the closet, you won't practice. If your running shoes are by the door, you will. Make the identity-aligned choice the path of least resistance. Help your future self succeed by reducing friction in the present. Reward also matters. Your brain craves payoff. It wants to feel good after effort. That doesn't mean ice cream after every workout. It means recognizing the internal win, the pride of consistency, the confidence of alignment, the satisfaction of acting like the person you're becoming. When you anchor reward to identity, habits become more than boxes to check, they become affirmations. You can't always control your cues. Life throws things at you. But you can control your response. And when that response aligns with who you want to be, you take power back. You prove to yourself that the past doesn't own you. The loop is flexible. The script can be rewritten. This is the architecture of change. Cue. Routine. Reward. Belief. With enough reps, the belief becomes identity. And once identity takes root, action becomes automatic. You no longer push yourself toward the habit. The habit pulls you forward. That's the tipping point. When the loop becomes less about what you do and more about who you are. In the next chapter, we'll explore why motivation is overrated, and why the real transformation happens when your identity makes action feel natural. Because success isn't about fighting for every step. It's about becoming someone for whom those steps are simply the next logical move. Habits follow a loop: cue, routine, reward, then identity. Repeating a loop reshapes your internal narrative. Identity grows when behavior and belief align consistently. Which current habit loop is shaping your identity, and does it align with who you want to be? Pick one daily cue. Attach a small identity-aligned action to it. Repeat it for the next 3 days. Chapter 7: Becoming Before Achieving. There's a silent myth that runs through most self-improvement efforts, that motivation leads to action, and action leads to results. So people wait. They wait to feel inspired. They wait for the perfect conditions. They wait until they're ready. But motivation is fleeting. It's a spark, not a source of power. What creates lasting change isn't motivation. It's identity. The achiever mindset says, do more to get more. But the identity-first mindset says, become more so the right actions feel natural. This shift changes everything. Because when you focus on becoming, action is no longer forced. It flows from who you are. Imagine someone training for a marathon. If they focus only on achievement, every run is a struggle. They measure themselves against the finish line. They criticize every setback. They're performing for a future reward. But if they focus on becoming a runner, the mindset shifts. Each run is no longer a test. It's a confirmation. A vote for who they already are. When you lead with achievement, failure feels like identity collapse. Miss a day, and the whole goal feels in jeopardy. But when you lead with becoming, failure is just feedback. It's part of the process, not a statement about your worth. You're not trying to hit a target. You're embodying a direction. This is why so many people burn out chasing goals. They aim for outcomes without anchoring those outcomes in identity. They treat habits like transactions. If I do this enough, I'll get that. But real transformation is not transactional, it's foundational. You don't become fit because you've earned it. You become fit because you've built the kind of life where fitness is part of your identity. That's why becoming must come before achieving. Because your behaviors will always snap back to your beliefs. If success feels like acting, it won't last. If success feels like alignment, it becomes sustainable. You no longer need to white-knuckle your way through good habits. You simply express who you are. This doesn't mean achievement is bad. Goals matter. They give direction. But they're not the engine. They're the compass. Identity is the engine. It's what gets you moving and keeps you going when motivation fades. And it will fade. That's inevitable. There will be days when you don't feel inspired. When the results aren't showing. When the old patterns call louder than the new ones. On those days, the question isn't how do I push harder? It's, who am I showing up as right now? That question grounds you. It returns you to the root. Because at the core of every lasting transformation is not a to-do list, it's a person. Someone who chose to become before they achieved. Someone who rewrote their internal script, not by dreaming bigger, but by aligning their daily choices with a deeper truth. So don't wait to feel ready. Don't wait for the finish line to validate your effort. Start becoming now. Speak like the person you want to be. Think like them. Act like them. Eventually, you won't be pretending. You'll be remembering who you were capable of being all along. In the next chapter, you'll see how identity doesn't just shape your internal world, it shapes your external environment. Because once you begin to live from your identity, you'll start designing a life that reinforces it at every level. Identity must precede achievement for change to last. Motivation is unreliable, identity is sustainable. Success becomes effortless when it feels like alignment, not performance. Are you pursuing goals from a place of becoming or a place of proving? Write one sentence: I am the kind of person who. Then take one action today that proves it. Chapter 8: The Power of Environment. A cactus doesn't thrive in a rainforest. Not because it lacks potential, but because the environment isn't aligned with its nature. The same is true for people. You can have the best intentions, the clearest goals, and even a strong sense of identity, but if your environment works against you, progress slows. Identity needs a place to breathe. And that place is shaped by design, not default. Most people underestimate how much their surroundings shape their behavior. They think success is about willpower. But willpower is like a battery, it drains. Environment is like gravity. It either pulls you toward who you want to become or constantly drags you back to who you were. If you want to eat healthier, but your fridge is filled with junk, the friction will wear you down. If you want to be focused, but your phone buzzes every 5 minutes, distraction will win. If you want to read more, but the TV is the focal point of every room, entertainment will edge out growth. These aren't flaws in discipline. They're mismatches between identity and environment. You don't rise above your surroundings. You adapt to them. Which means if you want to become someone new, you must change more than your mindset, you must change your space. This doesn't always mean radical reinvention. It often starts with subtle cues. Identity is reinforced by what you see, what you hear, and what you touch. Want to become a writer? Keep a notebook visible at all times. Want to become more financially conscious? Track your spending where you can see it. Want to become more present? Put your phone in another room during conversations. Each environmental shift is a message to your subconscious. This is who I am now. People often think transformation requires dramatic change. But it's usually the arrangement of ordinary things that matters most. The book on your nightstand. The shoes by the door. The alarm clock across the room. The food at eye level. These details either reinforce the future you, or sabotage it. Even your relationships are part of your environment. The people around you constantly reflect back who you are and what's normal. If your circle normalizes growth, you'll stretch. If your circle normalizes self-sabotage, you'll shrink. It's not about cutting people off. It's about curating influence. Surround yourself with those who challenge your old story and support your new one. Your calendar is an environment. Your habits live there. If becoming a better version of yourself isn't scheduled, it won't survive the chaos. Identity needs time. It needs structure. It needs to be visible on the landscape of your life. If it's not written down, it's not protected. This is where change becomes sustainable. When your identity is no longer something you remember to practice, it's something your environment pulls out of you daily. You stop relying on effort and start relying on design. And when your world matches your vision, your habits don't need to be forced. They become the default. Look around right now. Is your environment set up for who you've been or who you're becoming? If it's the former, make one change today. One visual cue, one structural shift, one person to spend more time with. Because when your identity has a home, it starts to grow. In the next chapter, we'll explore what happens when things don't go according to plan, when failure hits. Because the truth is, even with the best identity and environment, setbacks happen. But when your foundation is identity first, even failure becomes part of becoming. Environment shapes identity more than willpower does. Design your space to reflect your future, not your past. Tiny changes in surroundings can unlock major shifts in behavior. Is your current environment reinforcing the person you're becoming, or the person you're trying to outgrow? Change one element of your environment today to support your desired identity. Chapter 9. Fail like the person you're becoming. Failure doesn't break identity. It reveals it. It shows what story you tell yourself when things don't go as planned. Most people treat failure as evidence that they aren't who they hope to be. One missed workout becomes, "I'm not disciplined." One relapse into old spending habits becomes, "I'll never get it right." But that interpretation is optional. Because identity isn't what happens when things go perfectly. It's what you practice when they don't. Everyone fails. The difference is how they respond. When your identity is outcome-based, failure feels like disqualification. But when your identity is process-based, failure is part of the pattern. It's not a crisis. It's data. And the person you're becoming knows how to use that data. Think about a sculptor. Every chip, every strike, every mistake becomes part of the process. They don't abandon the sculpture because of one misstep. They adapt. They adjust. They refine. Identity works the same way. It's not sculpted by perfection, it's shaped by perseverance. When failure hits, the default reaction is self-judgment. But judgment keeps you stuck. Curiosity moves you forward. Instead of saying, "Why can't I get this right?" ask, "What was I believing in that moment?" That question peels back the layer. It takes the moment of failure and turns it into a mirror. You begin to see what identity was driving the behavior. And more importantly, you see where it needs to shift. This is where resilience lives, not in gritting your teeth, but in remembering who you are becoming. You don't need to start over every time you fall. You just need to return. The vote you missed yesterday doesn't erase the 100 you've already cast. Progress isn't linear. But identity is cumulative. And failure, when handled well, actually speeds up the process. The person you're becoming doesn't avoid failure. They know how to fail better. They don't spiral into shame or throw away progress over one mistake. They know that missing a step doesn't mean abandoning the staircase. They've trained their response. They see failure as friction, not finality. And here's the paradox. When you stop fearing failure, you actually fail less. Because you're not stuck in the emotional aftermath. You bounce back faster. You realign quicker. You remember that your worth isn't on the line, your process is. And processes can be refined. Even more, failure builds humility. It strips away the illusion that transformation is a straight climb. It reminds you that becoming someone new isn't about appearing strong, it's about being faithful. Day after day. Especially when it's hard. So the next time you fall off track, don't ask whether you failed. Ask whether your response matches the identity you're building. Did you show up like a learner? Did you reflect instead of react? Did you realign without spiraling? That's success, even when the outcome wasn't perfect. Every setback is a test. Will you revert to who you were or return to who you're becoming? In the next chapter, you'll learn how identity makes habits feel automatic, not because you've mastered discipline, but because you've created a version of yourself for whom the right actions are simply normal. Because when you've trained your environment, your mindset, and your response to failure, consistency becomes your default. Failure doesn't define identity, it reveals it. The goal isn't to avoid setbacks, but to respond in alignment with your future self. Progress isn't perfect, but identity builds through how you recover. How do you typically respond to failure, and does that response reflect the person you're becoming? Think of one recent failure. Reframe it through the lens of identity. What did it teach you about who you're becoming? Chapter 10. From Discipline to Default. At first, every habit requires effort. You think about it. You negotiate with yourself. You push past resistance. That's discipline. It's necessary in the beginning. But discipline isn't the end goal. The goal is to shift from discipline to default, where the behavior no longer feels like a decision but simply part of who you are. This is what identity-first habits make possible. They rewire your internal autopilot. Not overnight, but over time. What once felt like a stretch becomes a standard. The behavior that used to require motivation becomes something you do without thinking. Like brushing your teeth or locking your door, it moves from intention to instinct. Consider someone learning to wake up early. At first, every morning is a battle. The alarm feels like a threat. The bed feels like a trap. But they persist. Not just with action, but with identity. They stop saying, "I'm not a morning person." They start saying, "This is who I am now." And slowly, their brain adjusts. The resistance fades. Eventually, early rising stops being a decision. It becomes the default. This isn't magic. It's momentum. The brain is constantly seeking efficiency. Repetition builds familiarity, and familiarity builds automation. The more a behavior is tied to your identity, the faster this shift happens. Because the mind wants to act in ways that align with how it sees itself. When that alignment is strong, effort becomes ease. The mistake many people make is trying to rely on discipline forever. They assume the struggle is permanent. So they grit their teeth, push harder, and burn out. But willpower is a temporary bridge. It's there to carry you into a new identity. Once you're there, the terrain changes. You no longer need to fight every step. You just walk. This is the payoff of becoming. Not that life gets easier, but that your actions feel more natural. You're not pretending anymore. You're expressing. The habit isn't a performance, it's a reflection. And when you reach that point, consistency feels less like pressure and more like peace. Even more, identity-based defaults are resilient. They're not easily disrupted by external chaos. Because they're not rooted in environment or energy levels, they're rooted in who you believe you are. So even on the hard days, the behavior shows up. Not perfectly, but predictably. This is why the earlier chapters mattered. You cast the votes. You shaped the environment. You reframed failure. All of that leads to this, a life where the right habits happen automatically, because they belong to someone like you. And the beauty of this shift is that it frees up energy. When your brain isn't constantly negotiating with itself, you can focus that energy elsewhere, on growth, on creativity, on deeper relationships. You no longer waste mental bandwidth debating whether to act. You act because it's who you are. So the next time someone tells you they admire your discipline, remember the truth. It's not discipline anymore. It's identity. It's years of small, repeated choices stacking into a default mode of living. It's the invisible momentum of becoming. In the final chapter, we'll bring it all together. You'll see how the person who once struggled to change has now become someone for whom ordinary success is inevitable, not through force, but through alignment. Because when identity leads, effort follows. The goal of habits is not constant discipline, but unconscious default. Repetition and identity alignment make behavior automatic. The more natural a habit feels, the more sustainable it becomes. Which habits in your life currently feel like discipline, and which ones have become default? Choose one habit that still requires effort. Reinforce it today with an identity statement. I am the kind of person who. Then act accordingly. Chapter 11. Becoming Inevitable. There's a moment when change stops feeling like effort and starts feeling like truth. When the habits you used to fight for now feel like home. When the gap between intention and action disappears, not because you've mastered discipline, but because you've rewritten your identity. You no longer have to convince yourself to act. You simply follow who you are. That's when success becomes inevitable. Not inevitable in the sense that life is perfect or struggle vanishes. But inevitable in the sense that you've become the kind of person who returns to growth no matter what. You don't rise and fall with emotion. You're grounded in something deeper. Identity has become your compass, not just your goal. The process wasn't fast. It wasn't loud. It didn't look like a breakthrough. It looked like showing up. Casting votes. Designing your environment. Reframing failure. Aligning behavior with belief. It looked like becoming the kind of person who could be trusted with consistency. And that consistency, multiplied over time, created a quiet power. This is the truth most people miss. Success isn't about doing extraordinary things. It's about becoming the kind of person for whom ordinary success is the default. The healthy person doesn't need a new diet every January. The focused person doesn't need a new productivity system every quarter. The disciplined person doesn't need a motivational speech every Monday. Their lives run on the rails of who they are, not what they hope to become. Identity is the great stabilizer. When storms come, you don't panic, you anchor. When progress stalls, you don't quit, you recalibrate. You've practiced becoming so consistently that your default is progress. Even setbacks move you forward, because they reinforce your resilience. At this stage, goals take on new meaning. They're no longer desperate attempts to fix what's broken. They're expressions of growth. They're not pressure, they're invitations. You pursue them not to feel like someone, but because you already are someone. The doing flows from the being. And perhaps most powerful of all, your identity begins to influence others. Not because you preach, but because you embody. People sense the alignment. They feel the integrity. You become a mirror for what's possible, not through advice, but through example. And the ripple effect begins. Your quiet, consistent transformation gives others permission to pursue their own. This is the full arc of identity-first habits. Not a system of behavior, but a way of being. Not a checklist, but a compass. You've moved from questions like what should I do? To who am I becoming? From external pressure to internal alignment. From discipline to default. From effort to inevitability. And now, you live with a new kind of confidence. Not loud. Not performative. But rooted. You trust yourself. Not because you're perfect, but because you've proven you can show up. That you can rebuild. That you can live in alignment with the person you've chosen to become. The final challenge is to keep becoming. Because identity is not a destination. It's a direction. A practice. A path. You will evolve. Your goals will shift. Life will stretch you. But you now have the blueprint. You know how to start from identity, align your habits, and let consistency carry you forward. You don't need to become someone else. You need to become more of who you already are, on purpose, with intention, and without apology. You've done more than build habits. You've built a foundation. A life. A self. One that can carry the weight of your vision. And that makes the future not just possible, but inevitable. Success becomes inevitable when identity leads and behavior aligns. You've moved from effort to embodiment, from hoping to becoming. Identity is a direction, not a destination. Keep becoming. Who have you become, and who are you still becoming? Write a declaration of identity in one sentence. Read it aloud every morning for the next 7 days. Let it guide your becoming. Take care and be well.